Belfast is the second largest city in Ireland and the capital of Northern Ireland. With the Cave Hill in the background, a Burns and Laird steamer has just left its berth at Donegal Quay, heading for Glasgow. As she sails down the river towards the sea, she passes the Queen's Island, on which is located the shipyards of Harland and Wolff. On these slipways, some of the world's finest ships have been constructed. We are reminded of the fate of the Titanic, which left Belfast Lough in April 1912. The recollection of her tragic destiny still sends a shiver down the spine after all these years. No cine of the Titanic exists, but these shots of her sister ship, the Olympic, also built in Belfast, were passed off for decades as being of the Titanic herself. This footage shows the Olympic being prepared for a voyage from New York, a destination which the Titanic never reached. The New York identification markings on the sterns of the tugs have been crudely obliterated by a crafty editor to ensure the success of the ruse being perpetrated. The river and its associated docks played an important part in the life of the city. A familiar sight for many years were the tugs and barges of the Belfast firm of John Kelly. Coal was taken from the docks up to the gasworks on the Ormeau Road, which backed onto the river, near the spot where Belfast Central Railway Station was built in the 1970s. Here we see empty barges heading down the river towards the docks and passing under the Albert Bridge. Though Belfast was a major industrial city, such scenes as these of sheep and cattle being driven through the streets to the docks for shipment to England and Scotland could still be seen in the 1960s. These were more reminiscent of a fair day in the west of Ireland than a major industrial city. Horse-drawn transport was not uncommon in the streets of Belfast in the 1960s. Horse drays and carts made their sedate progress through the city centre streets, their gleaming harness and sedate progress in marked contrast to the pace and bustle of a modern city. To cater for the needs of its growing population, Belfast Corporation, in common with most major cities in the British Isles, built an extensive network of electric tramways, which at its maximum extent before the Second World War comprised 52 route miles of track. These scenes were taken by Mr. W.A. Camwell. The cost of maintaining the system and the growing congestion made the corporation look towards trolleybuses as a replacement for their trams. The first route converted was that of the Falls Road, chosen because it was self-contained and had a depot. Trolleybus operation began on the 28th of March 1938. 14 experimental buses were obtained from 7 manufacturers, and 2 of these are seen in this 1938 view of Falls Road depot. The 2 at the front are T4, a 68-seat Crossley with Harkness bodywork and electrical equipment by Metropolitan Vickers, and T5, a Daimler vehicle. The first trolleybuses lasted 20 years and were not withdrawn until 1958. T10, a courier bus with Crompton electrical equipment, is seen here in Donegal Place in 1948. Up to 1950, the trolleybuses were painted blue and cream. After that, the more familiar red and cream livery was adopted. Here, trams and trolleybuses are seen jostling for position in Donegal Place in 1948. At its peak in the early 1950s, the Belfast trolleybus system was the biggest outside London in the British Isles, with over 240 vehicles in service and 36 route miles being served by trolleybuses. The first tramway replacements took place in the east of the city. Craiga route opened in February 1942, followed shortly afterwards by that to Castlereagh. Stormont was reached in November 1942, Dundonald in November 1944. The routes to Bloomfield and Ormeau were added in 1946 and 1948 respectively. Trolleybuses reached Glengormley in the north of the city in 1949 and took over from trams on the Show Road in October 1950. The penultimate extensions to the trolleybus network came in 1952 when the Glen Road, Hollywood Road and Whitewell routes were added to the network. 3 depots serviced trolleybuses during the 30 years they operated in Belfast. The original Falls Road depot closed for operational purposes in 1947, though as this 1963 view shows, access was provided into the depot for trolleybuses as they were maintained and overhauled here right up to the closure of the system in 1968. Short Strand depot operated trolleybuses from October 1950 until March 1963, providing vehicles in the main for the East Belfast routes. A new trolleybus depot was opened in May 1947 to replace the original Falls depot. This was at Haymarket, near the gasworks, on the city side of the Albert Bridge. Haymarket was Belfast's main trolleybus depot and was in use up to May 1968. Before we look at Belfast trolleybuses in action, let us remind ourselves of the types of vehicles that could be seen on the streets of the city in the 1960s when our films were made. The oldest types still in service are represented by number 33, seen here in August 1963 at Donegal Square North on a service to Bloomfield. Delivered in February 1941, this AEC trolleybus had electrical equipment from GEC and was not withdrawn until October 1963. A large batch of post-war vehicles were purchased to expedite the withdrawal of the trams. Number 168, seen here, was built by Guy with GEC Electrics. It is seen at the Whitewell terminus in April 1968. The bus had just been overhauled and was subsequently preserved in England. The final delivery of trolleybuses came in 2 batches in the early 1950s. These were all BUT vehicles. They differed in the design of their bodies. Number 198, seen here at Strathmore Park terminus on the Antrim Road on the last day of services there in June 1965, was delivered in October 1950 and lasted until May 1968. Number 228 was one of the later batch of BUTs. It was supplied in 1954, and the eagle-eyed may spot differences in the window spacings from the earlier batch. 228 is passing Carlisle Circus on an Antrim Road service in this 1965 view. All the trolleybuses in our period had 6 wheels with one exception. This was number 246, a 4-wheel Sunbeam delivered in 1958 as a prototype for the next generation of trolleybuses that were never to be built. 246 is seen here passing the law courts on its way back to Haymarket Depot. Finally, a couple of points to note for those not too familiar with trolleybus operations. At termini, the usual method of turnaround was by way of a turning circle. These could be large, like that at the Grove on the Show Road, seen here, or very cramped, like that at Casement Park, the terminus of the Falls Road route. The rear end of a Belfast trolleybus was quite distinctive. The back panels of the top deck were painted grey, as deposits of carbon and rainwater from the overhead would have reduced the red and cream livery to this condition very quickly. The hooks on the roof above the grey panel secured the trolley poles when the bus was not in service and stopped them flailing around. Trolleybuses had a distinctive metal triangle at the back containing a brake warning light which lit up the word STOP in red. They also carried the letter T for trolleybus to warn other road users. The round opening at the bottom was used to contain a long bamboo pole with which the conductor could rewire the trolleys should they lose contact with the overhead wire. In 1963, John Laird, realising that the days of the trolleybuses were numbered, set out to film the routes which remained. In doing this, not only did he make a record of these silent and elegant vehicles, but inadvertently he captured a slice of social history, of the city in happier times before the troubles and the planners swept away so much that was once commonplace. In fact, it was the withdrawal of trolleybuses on the route to Castlereagh in East Belfast which spurred him into action. We begin our films at Short Strand Depot, which closed to trolleybuses in 1963, when the East Belfast routes, for which it had provided vehicles, were converted to motorbus operation. Trolley and diesel buses cross the Queen's Bridge towards the city centre. Our travels commence with the routes which served the Antrim Road. Routes 1 and 2 terminated here at Lansdowne Road, where there was a turning circle. Routes 5 and 6 carried on to the Bellevue terminus. While routes 3 and 4 served Glengormley, where the cramped location of the terminus meant that there was not enough room for a turning circle, and trolleybuses had to reverse round a triangular formation of overhead wires. This was something that trolleybuses were rarely called upon to do, and called for great skill on the part of the driver. Antrim Road buses on routes 1, 3 and 5 went via Carlisle Circus. Buses on routes 2, 4 and 6 travelled via Duncairn Gardens. Here a bus on number 4 route is turning into York Street from Duncairn Gardens, on its way from Glengormley to the city centre. The starting point for the Antrim Road buses in the city centre was here in Castle Place. We next follow one of the cross-town trolleybus routes which ran from Cregagh in the east of the city to Carsglen in the northwest. Buses going to Carsglen carried the number 35, those for Cregagh were 33s. This is the view from the top deck of a 35 heading down Donegal Place and Royal Avenue in March 1963. Here a number 35 negotiates Carlisle Circus. And turns into the Ballysillan Road towards the terminus. Trams on the Cliftonville Road were withdrawn in 1947 and motor buses were used in the interim until the new trolleybus route was opened in April 1950. The wires were extended to Carsglen beyond the old tram terminus. Leaving Carsglen, 35s on their way to Cregga went down past Cliftonville Circus and headed for the city centre via Frederick Street. From Donegal Square North, the 33s went down Chichester Street, passing the Law Courts, and headed towards Cregga via the Albert Bridge. The route to Cregga was one of the first in East Belfast to be converted from tram to trolleybus operation. Trolleybus operated on this route from February 1941. This is the roundabout at Bell's Bridge. Trolleybuses ceased to operate the whole of the Cregga to Carsglen route from October the 13th, 1963. We next pick up another East Belfast route, the number 30 to Bloomfield. Trolleybus operation began on this route in May 1946. The original intention had been to replace all trams with trolleybuses by 1944, but the war slowed up delivery of vehicles and equipment. Priority was given to the routes in East Belfast. This is the Bloomfield terminus. Heading back from Bloomfield towards the city centre, a number 30 passes St Donald's Church at the junction of the Bearsbridge and Bloomfield roads, and passes a once familiar green and cream UTA bus on the Bearsbridge Road. A bus from Bloomfield turns into Cromack Street on its way back to the city centre. East Belfast was very well served by its trolleybuses. Several destinations were served by buses which used both the Queen's and the Albert Bridges. Here a trolleybus heading for the Queen's Bridge passes the Burdens and Laird steamer to Glasgow at Donegal Quay. A number 17 en route for Dundonald heads over the Albert Bridge. Routes 18 and 19 were short workings along the Newtonards Road as far as the Knock Road. 18 was via the Queen's Bridge, 19 via the Albert Bridge. This is the turning circle at Knock Road. Routes 16 and 17 served Dundonald. Buses on 16 route used the Queen's Bridge, 17s went via the Albert Bridge. This is a short working to the Hollywood Arches, turning into Grampian Avenue. The conductor hops off the bus to set the overhead wires for the left turn at the bottom of the street. Several routes operated up the Belmont Road. Belmont Drive, seen here, was a turning circle for some workings. Others carried on up Massey Avenue to the gates of Stormont, where the conductor sets the overhead to enable the bus to return towards the city. These routes also offered what must be the most spectacular turning circle in British trolleybus history, as number 22s and 23s continued up to Parliament Buildings at Stormont on Mondays to Fridays. On Saturday and Sunday, as we saw in the previous sequence, most of the services terminated at Stormont gates. Stormont was specially built to house the Northern Ireland Parliament and was opened by the Prince of Wales, later Edward VIII, on November the 17th, 1932. John Laird filmed these scenes at the end of the very bad winter of 1963, and reminders of the heavy snows of that year are still to be seen on the grounds of Stormont. Trolleybus services to Stormont began on March the 26th, 1942, and were withdrawn along with the services to Dundonald on April the 1st, 1963. At 23 heads back to the city along the Hollywood Road. We take our leave of the once extensive network of trolleybus routes which served East Belfast as a number 17 heads towards the city along the Albert Bridge Road. This is the city centre in 1968, near the end of trolleybus operations. The corporation had decided to phase out the trolleybuses and had purchased a large number of Daimler diesel buses as their replacements. These views show part of the overhead in Donegal Square North. At the peak of trolleybus operations, there were 6 sets of parallel wires here. Trolleybuses are powered by electricity and got their supply from trolleys running along a pair of overhead wires. In the 1920s and 1930s, public service vehicle regulations restricted the size of motor buses. Trams and trolleybuses were governed by the laws relating to tramways and light railways, and were exempt from the regulations imposed on buses. This is part of the overhead in Castle Street, used by Falls Road buses. These unusual shots show the business end of a trolleybus. This is Haymarket Depot. Driver Walter Weir takes bus number 212, a BUT vehicle delivered in January 1954, on a trial run to test a problem with the overhead nearby. Haymarket was Belfast's main trolleybus depot. This is the view had by the driver as he takes his trolleybus into Cromack Street. An overhead repair crew arrive on the scene. Consultations between the driver and the crew identify the fault. And the bus heads back to Haymarket Depot. This is one of several AEC-built tar wagons used to repair the overhead wires in Belfast. Almost before the vehicle stops, the crew are out and climbing up to the platform. The safety catch is released. And the overhead platform is cranked round into position. The repairs are done and the crew head off to attend to the next problem. The overhead repair wagons could also be used to rescue broken down buses. TW56 is seen here attending to a broken down bus on the Falls Road. The first trolleybuses in Belfast ran on the Falls Road route. Number 19 passing on a Glen Road service was delivered in June 1941. The last trolleybus route to be opened was the number 11 to the White Rock Road. This was a branch of the Falls Road service and was opened on May the 18th, 1959. By this time, trolleybus services had been withdrawn from the Hollywood Road and Ormeau routes. And it is something of a paradox that two routes had already closed before the last extension to the system had been built. The Glen Road bus on number 13 route passes Falls Road Depot. And heads past St. Teresa's Church to its terminus. The terminus of the first trolleybus route was at Fruithill Park. But the wires were later extended to a turning circle, a very tight one at that, at Casement Park, seen here. Though Falls Road Depot closed for operational purposes in 1947 to trolleybuses, it continued to overhaul vehicles until the end of the system in 1968. We will now take a look at the routes which serve the Shore Road and Whitewell. From the city centre we take a trip down Royal Avenue and along York Street on the top deck of a trolleybus. The trolleybus on the other side of the road is slowing down for the stop at York Road railway station. The used paper tickets on the windowsill and the Belfast Corporation Transport bus stop will be familiar to many who use Belfast trolleybuses. A trolleybus approaches the Fort William terminus on the Shore Road. The large red brick building in the middle distance was originally a tram depot. Number 8 trolleybuses terminated here at Fort William. The number 10s continued further along the Shore Road before turning up the Whitewell Road to a terminus at the Throne Hospital. Many of the buses from Whitewell were extended beyond the city centre and ran up the Falls Road, this forming another useful cross-town link. Here a number 12 approaches the junction of the Whitewell and Shore Roads. And passes the flats on the Shore Road heading for town. In the opposite direction, many of the Whitewell buses started from Casement Park on the Andersonstown Road. An Ulster television camera crew took some interesting footage of one of these cross-town number 12s heading along the Shore Road, en route from Whitewell to the Falls. Trolleybus number 226, another BUT vehicle delivered in June 1954 with the standard 68-seat Harkness body and electrical equipment by GEC, is seen going along this route. Number 226 lasted until the end of trolleybus operation in Belfast on Sunday, May the 12th, 1968. These shots taken from a car in front of the trolleybus show how flexible the vehicle actually was. The length of the trolley poles allows the bus to move quite a distance away from its overhead to pass parked cars and pull in to the curb for stops. We take our leave of Belfast trolleybuses with some scenes at Haymarket Depot. The lines of buses await their next call of duty. Here is the unique Sunbeam four-wheeler number 246, which represented the next generation of trolleybuses, which were never to grace the streets of Belfast. Trolleybus services ended in May 1968, just before the Troubles erupted and the music died for Belfast. For many of us, the trolleybuses are forever associated with the more innocent and peaceful era in the life of the city, which, as the nightmare of the Troubles rolls on, now seems to have been a very long time ago. If you're interested in Irish transport subjects, you will enjoy Irish Railways Volume 1, Historic Films by Harry Luff from the 1950s and 60s, which is currently available from online. The much-awaited second volume in the series will be published at Easter 1993. Entitled The Swan Song of Steam in Ulster, this covers the years from 1962 to 64 and features colour films by John Laird, some of which you are seeing now. The highly acclaimed Irish Railways in Colour by Tom Ferris, containing over 220 views of Irish Railways between 1955 and 1967, is currently available from Midland at £14.99. Easter 1993 will see the publication by Midland of Ernest Shepper's History of the Midland Great Western Railway. And at the same time, Tom Ferris's new book, The Irish Narrow Gauge of Pictorial History, will also be published at £14.99. All of these items are available from good bookshops, or in case of difficulty, from Midland Counties Publications, 24 The Hollow, Earl Shilton, Leicester, LE9 7NA.